Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian here at RAF Fairford in the British countryside for the annual Royal International Air Tattoo, one of the leading gatherings of air power leaders from around the world as well as aircraft from around the world. Our coverage here is sponsored by Leonardo DRS, and we're honored to have with us retired French Air Force General Jean-Paul Paloméros, who is former Supreme Allied Commander Transformation and a former French Air Force Chief. Who also, congratulations, sir, you're the chief of the Retired Air Chiefs Association.
Well, I will take over this wonderful association. That will be a pleasure. We are looking in the past, and we are very proud of our past, but we are looking in the future together, and we are supporting air power as a key tool for the future.
It is, and I know that I've spoken to actually serving air chiefs who've enjoyed the amount of combined intellectual horsepower you guys bring to help them solve problems. Speaking of solving problems, that was your job when you were at Supreme Allied Command Transformation to sort of focus the alliance on the future and the new challenges the alliance faced. We just had an alliance summit. You have participated and helped prepare for those. It was a controversial summit. Give us sort of your strategic eye view. What were successes, and particularly a lot of focus on the American president's role in that conference, the demand for 4% spending, for example, and some of the other statements. Talk to us on what you think was positive that was accomplished and what from your perspective was problematic.
Well, for decades, the US presidents are asking Europeans to do their job, which is fair. You know, the alliance is about sharing values and common interest as well since 1949. And this is the key of keeping the alliance together. So perhaps this time the real challenge is there. Are we ready to take on the challenge of the future, addressing the future threats together? Because the defense investment is important. When I was in ACT, I pushed for 2% and 20% investment. We have managed in the World Summit to set up with 28 countries this pledge, if I may say so. So I think now the US president is pushing even more. But he must understand as well that you cannot push the countries to do more than they can sustain. So on the one hand, it's fair to say that the European countries are not doing enough, and we recognize that. On the other hand, they cannot do more than what they can. So we need to strike a balance, and we found in 2014 that 2%, 20% was the right balance. And I cannot see any European countries really going much more than that on the long term. You can pretend you will achieve that, but you won't achieve anything. So NATO is not a bargain like anything. It's an alliance. Allies are allies for the best and for the worst since the Second World War. And perhaps this is a message for the US president saying you are not bargaining with partners. You are really in a strong political and military alliance. Yes, the allies must fulfill their task, their duty, their pledge. But on the other hand, we must keep faithful to the engagement in NATO, which was as well to combine the common interest, the prosperity, if I may say so, freedom, values together, and not splitting all of that in a kind of bargain. So this is the risk in my perspective.
I've covered, we're at a real air show, so I've covered the alliance for a very long time, and unity has always been the #1 feature of the alliance, that if you show disunity, whether it was the Soviet Union would take advantage of it, or you know, when there was the rift and there was sort of the semi-French withdrawal, there was real concern that that was going to give the Soviets an opportunity to take advantage of it. Now we're seeing something that is a very, very dramatic step in the minds of some, that there was a rough transatlantic alliance with the Bush administration over Iraq. There were challenges in the Obama administration where Europeans felt we weren't paying enough attention to them as the administration focused on the Middle East and then in Asia, increasingly in Asia. From your perspective, what's the danger of disunity? Does it, for example, give Vladimir Putin an opportunity to test the alliance in a way that's short of war, but something that actually increases disunity?
Oh, for sure, there is a risk, and I'm sure that Vladimir Putin, perhaps others, could take the benefit of this feeling of the lack of solidarity, of unity, as you said. But on the other hand, we must say that nothing happened so far. The worst is possible, but it didn't happen so far. The US are still committed in Europe, and the Europeans are doing better. Not perhaps enough, but they are still doing better. So there must be encouraged in that way. And we have other problems to solve as well. For instance, being here in Britain, the Brexit is still in front of us, and we must keep the Britain committed to the defense of Europe. And we must do that for the sake of Europe, for the Britain. And we must keep on doing that together, because now we have to fight on the conventional domain, air, sea, land, but as well on unconventional, non-conventional domains like cyber, information warfare. Innovation is another vision and another objective. So we have to do that together. This is absolutely crucial. And there are some good news, because we are able to do better together, and the NATO reform structure is going in the right way. NATO will integrate a new country with Macedonia, which will extend the sphere of peace and security to the Balkans, which is a good move. So let's see what will happen. But I hope that the US administration will not push too far and will not reduce his commitment to Europe, but will leave as well the Europeans doing their job. Because on the one hand, you cannot say the European must do better, but when the European tries to do something, as we have seen in the recent past, then you criticize the European because you pretend that they are doing their own things. Well, Europeans must move forward. There is a plan, there is a budget investment, European budget investment, which has been built now, with many billion dollars, euros. So we have to see what we achieve with that. So if we want really to keep the alliance, it must be fair, it must be balanced. Europeans must do their job, but the Americans need to keep on their commitment as well to keep this alliance together. This is for their benefit on the long term.
What's your sense on? There are some you talk to in Washington who will say that, or some who are some supporters of the president, that that part of this is Europe has to give, individual European countries have to give trade concessions to Washington and buy arms from Washington, and in exchange they should get security. A much more transactional view that you discussed a little bit earlier with it in your comments. Is there a danger that that fractures the alliance, and that, for example, transatlantic armaments links would potentially get severed as nations decide, well, we don't want to invest in European, American systems, we want to buy European systems more. How do you think that dynamic affects the thinking of European leaders?
When you are in an alliance, what you don't want is to frustrate your allies, or even worse, to humiliate your allies. So we must be careful altogether not doing that. Would it be from the US to Europe, from the European Union to the Brits with the Brexit? This is a test time. Really, this is a crucial time that we are living. Whether we are able to keep together this wonderful alliance that we have had for decades since the end of 2 world wars, that alliance didn't come out of the blue. That was a necessity, and very far-thinking people managed to put that together. So we must be very, very conscious of the responsibility that we have in hands, and try to mix both the interest, the common interest, and the values. And I think it's feasible, because we are facing a huge challenge from China, a huge challenge from Russia in different domains. And if we don't stick together, we will be a prey, and certainly in Europe, for these countries who are really waiting their time just to come. And China is there already. So we have now to decide what is the future of of Europe and US together. The future alliance, the alliance for the future. This is what is the key. Facing all these threats, facing all this very demanding environment. And this is striking to see that we are still committed together in many places in the world for the benefit of peace and security. That should be the main driver of what we do. Not the trade deficit is a very complex situation because nobody knows exactly what could be the effects of putting tariffs. At the end of the day, that could be a kind of boomerang coming back on the US or the EU, but it will destruct value. It will destruct jobs for sure. If we don't stick together with our values and common interests, we will open the doors for others, which don't share the same values, which are very far from our culture, and I feel still very close from the British, the American culture than any other countries in the world. So we must keep that in mind, and our common history as well. As we are celebrating the 100th anniversary of the First World War, as we are still commemorating the D-Day and many other commitments from the US coming to save and to help Europe. It's not the time to divorce. It's the time to strengthen. We don't want to build walls. We need to build bridges.
You were focused very, very much on hybrid wars under your command, as well as improving readiness was a big focus. Talk to us a little bit about some of the moves that the Alliance is making to improve readiness, whether it's on the right track, what more has to be done, and also that you were an advocate of the hardest of hard power, but were a leader who was always talking about the fact that an adversary wants to win without fighting, and that must change the whole continuum and the whole security enterprise, not just the defense piece of it. So talk on both of those terms.
Well, as far as the hybrid nature of the world and strategies, it shows that only a great coordination, a great collaborative work could face those kind of strategy. I mean, when you see what happened in Ukraine and in many other places, obviously our potential adversaries will play all they have in their inventory, all the tools they have in their inventory to destabilize our democracies. So what is needed is perhaps a strong alliance to protect NATO as a whole against the main threats, the dramatic, vital threats, but as well the EU and the nations to do their job in trying to reinforce their resilience, internal and together. So there is a place for the NATO as a whole, for EU and for the nations to do that together. So it's not exclusive, it's inclusive. We need a strong collaboration. We have pushed a lot of projects and it's going forward. NATO and EU have not worked so well for decades, so I think we are on a good track. Now the question is how we achieve that. It needs commitment, money, this is true, but it needs as well a real political trust and confidence. And this is for NATO as well as for the EU. Trust and confidence is still the best asset that we have in the inventory. The sense of the common value, the sense of the common history, a common tradition and common culture, and a common faith in the future in a certain way. And this is what is at stake today.
Do you think that folks for too long have taken the alliance for granted? And is it time for everybody to make a much, much more vocal case for the importance not just of the alliance, but human rights, as well as the importance of having an international order, a global rules-based order?
I'm fully on this line that we have to put together our vision of the future route, keeping the human rights as a key value by itself, the global multilateral organization as a key asset in this very complex and changing world, and doing that for the best of every nations of the alliance of the EU together. So we have to convince, we cannot force anybody, including the US president, we have to convince him that this is the better future that we can build together, and then isolating the US from the other part of the world will not work, that the EU is still very, that the EU nations are close together, they get a great solidarity, they are ready to fight and they are ready to take their full share in NATO, and they have to demonstrate that. And we are open to partnership, provided that anybody who would like to join or to contribute to that endorse the same value and the same objectives.
You triggered one last question. Let me ask you this. There is a concern that the president, when he meets with Putin, is going to come out with a surprise, some kind of strategic surprise that may, again, unsteady the alliance. What's your expectation? What is your hope? And what is, from your standpoint, a worst-case scenario that could happen at that meeting?
My hope is that they come well together, and that we will be able to reinstall a high-level discussion between Russia, European Union, NATO, as it was the case, as it has been the case for decades now. So the worst could be that there was some dramatic declaration with nothing behind that, and just that it would be just a show.
Okay, you want to say that again?
And that could be just a show for the benefit of medias and communication, and nothing behind that. And I wonder if Mr. Trump could open the door for Russia to NATO, which will be really a disruptive initiative. Why not? Provided that Russia endorse the values and the common interest of NATO. That's the question.
General Jean-Paul Paloméros,
thank you.
Former Supreme Allied Commander Transformation, Chief of the French Air Force. Sir, always a pleasure talking to you. Great to see you.
Always a pleasure as well. Thank you.